When Fu Jiangxue was 5 years old, her originally happy family was suddenly struck by tragedy. Her parents passed away, and the once well-off family was devastated. Little Jiangxue was taken to her aunt's house, but the family was only after the inheritance by her parents. Living under their roof, Fu Jiangxue was subjected to constant beatings and verbal abuse, each day filled with fear and trepidation. Overnight, she went from being the cherished little princess of her family to a despised outcast, like a rat crossing the street. This marked the first major shift in her heart. Meanwhile, in another parallel world, I was brought to this world by some unknown system. Only by completing specific tasks at certain times could I return. Fearing I would escape, the villainous Fu Jiangxue bound me with a 50-meter-long iron chain inside a villa. Jiangxue, can you please not be so heartless as to leave me alone? During the day, Fu Jiangxue was gentle and weak, obeying my every word. But at night, she would either secretly put drugs in my food or use incense on me, claiming it was to help me sleep well. While I was sound asleep in bed, Fu Jiangxue would sneak in, cat-like, pull back the covers, and slip in beside me. Then, she would bury herself in my arms, greedily inhaling my scent. Every time I saw Fu Jiangxue, I couldn't understand why she always trailed behind me, calling me brother, even though we weren't related. The first time I met her, she was 6. Too young to understand why her aunt's family disliked her. She was a confused child, bullied relentlessly, yet incredibly sensible, always helping with chores, no matter how tiring. I saw her again when she started high school. A beautiful girl, easily targeted, her unhappy family life had made her withdrawn, isolated, and rebellious. That was my longest stay, 3 months, during which I used the transfer student identity the system provided to guide her back on track, transforming her from a truant, brawling delinquent into a top student. My third arrival coincided with her 18th birthday. With the college entrance exams looming, something felt off. I was on vacation at home when the damned system yanked me back, claiming Fu Jiangxue was in trouble and I needed to intervene immediately. Fu Jiangxue was sitting on the rooftop in a bad mood, and I was told to rush over. I was standing not far from her, watching her at the edge. It took all my strength to coax the little girl down, promising her I'd help her get into a good university, to give her hope. I could only blame myself for making such grand promises. As they say, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Down from the rooftop, she refused to go home. It was already late, so I had to find her a place to stay. At the hotel, when I first brought her in, she was incredulous, then undeniably thrilled. Neither of us had ID. I didn't have one, and she hadn't brought hers. So, we went to a small, rather old, single-room hotel. Unexpectedly, even such a shabby place required ID. Finally, with the system's help, we managed to check in. But inside the room, I just sat on the sofa and watched her sleep. The excitement on her face vanished instantly. I'm 18. I'm an adult, Fu Jiangxue said, her eyes flushed, her voice seductive and tinged with resentment. Seeing her serious expression, I was amused. I know, swear you're 18. You're not a child anymore. The young girl before me was in the bloom of youth, a budding flower. Her beautiful face still held a trace of innocence. But in my eyes, she was like my little sister. After all, I had watched her grow up. Seeing I didn't understand, a look of disappointment and resentment crossed her face. It's my birthday today. Will you, brother, arrange me to sleep tonight? She threw herself into my arms. Where I couldn't see, her eyes held a possessiveness and a touch of Yandere unusual for her age. I wanted to refuse. It felt wrong. But remembering it was her birthday, I couldn't bring myself to say no. After some thought, I agreed. She lay obediently in bed, and I half reclined beside her, gently patting the covers, just like when I jug her to sleep as a child. I didn't notice anything amiss, and she closed her eyes happily, as usual. Just as I thought she was about to fall asleep, Fu Jiangxue suddenly opened her eyes. Could you stay? Stay with me always? Will you spend every birthday with me from now on? My face tightened. Did she know something? Then I reconsidered. She shouldn't. The system always gave me a new identity whenever I approached her. Yes, brother won't leave. I'll always be with little Jiangxue. I spoke these insincere words while comforting her. Fu Jiangxue's face lit up, and she reached out her slender hand, gesturing for me to link pinkies with her. Unable to resist, I extended my hand. As our hands, one large and one small, touched, Fu Jiangxue stared at my knuckles, lost in thought. Confused, I asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, but you have to keep your promise, or I'll have to punish you." She snapped back to reality and spoke. Then, she reached out, hugged my waist, and buried her head in my chest, greedily inhaling my scent. I froze, taken aback by her boldness. Just then, the system's voice rang in my mind. I knew my time was up. I had to leave. My heart softened, and I let her be. Night deepened, and Fu Jiangxue's breathing grew steady. The system's voice echoed in my mind, and the silver bracelet on my wrist flashed incessantly. Gently, I disengaged her arms from my waist. She was holding on tight. It took considerable effort to pull away. The silver bracelets, flashing, intensified to an alarming rate. I looked back at the small figure on the bed, sighed, and vanished. The room remained silent for about a minute. Then Fu Jiangxue's eyes suddenly opened. She scanned the empty room, and a wave of disappointment washed over her. He lied again. Next time I catch him, I'll definitely punish him. A strange, almost morbid expression flickered across her beautiful face. 3 years have passed since I returned from Fu Jiangxue's world, and this damned system has been utterly silent the entire time. According to the original storyline, the next plot point should be Fu Jiangxue as the villain, falling hopelessly in love with the male lead at a banquet originally intended to help the love between the male and the leads blossom. Her unfortunate childhood, the harshness of her aunt and uncle, and the various discriminations and prejudices she faced at school. It made her original character paranoid, ruthless, and indifferent. It is precisely because of this decisive and ruthless character that she is like a fish in water in this cannibalistic mall. However, going against the original main heroine ultimately leads to no good end. According to the original development of the plot, Fu Jiangxue likes the male lead Lin Wanhao, and the male lead Lin Wanhao has a special love for the female lead Xiao Wanwan. This is because of love at first sight for the male lead, and then she is everywhere in the mall and the female lead enemy. Until the end, she was suppressed by the destined heroine, and with the male lead's favoritism towards the heroine, Fu Jiangxue was defeated by the two and ended up with a bankrupt company and a ruined family. The turning point this time was at this banquet. Fu Jiangxue was drugged by a competitor, and after losing her mind, she was encountered by the male lead, Lin Wanhao, who kindly sent her to the hospital. And after that, Fu Jiangxue loved him to the core. After listening to the system's narration, I was silent for a moment, and then I asked the system, "Have I not changed anything by doing so much before?" The system stammered for a long time without being able to explain why, and finally only told me that I would know when the time came. For some reason, I always had a bad feeling in my heart. The ring on my wrist flickered again, and the familiar sensation returned. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a familiar place. I casually found a mirror and discovered that my appearance hadn't changed a bit. In the past, whenever I met Fu Jiangxue, the system would transform me into myself at the same age and then slightly adjust my features, although the direction of the adjustments varied each time. I was only surprised by this for a moment, and then I didn't pay much attention to it. As long as my appearance was different each time, so she wouldn't recognize me, the rest was secondary. Following the system's prompts, I took a taxi to the hotel where the banquet was being held. With the system, things like invitations were naturally a breeze. Once I smoothly entered the venue, I found that the banquet was just starting, but I needed to find Fu Jiangxue quickly and keep an eye on her. I searched the large venue for several rounds, but couldn't find the girl. However, through the discussions of people around me, I learned that Fu Jiangxue had been doing quite well these past few years, and her business was vaguely becoming the industry leader. Many of the people who came were here to curry favor with her. That's not right. As the villain, Fu Jiangxue shouldn't be able to steal the limelight from the female lead. Never mind, the priority now is to find Fu Jiangxue. But as the banquet was halfway through, I had even seen Lin Wanhao and Xiao Wanwan. Just as I was getting anxious, the system, which had been a mere spectator all along, suddenly told me that Fu Jiangxue was in a certain private room. Hearing this, I was taken aback and hurried towards the room number the system gave me. I kept thinking that there should still be time. I found a room number and easily opened the door. But when I opened the door, it was pitch black inside. I was about to turn on the light, but just then, a sharp pain came from the back of my neck, and my consciousness slipped into darkness. I don't know how long it had been, but when I woke up again, my neck hurt like hell, as if it was broken. Consciousness gradually returned, and looking at the dark environment around me, I wondered where I was. That's right. Wasn't I looking for Fu Jiangxue? Recalling the sharp pain in the back of my neck, I gradually understood. It seemed I had been knocked out. If that's the case, had the mission already failed? Thinking of this, I started calling for the system, but only silence responded. At this point, the damn system was still playing dead. Just then, I suddenly felt something was off. My hands and feet were inexplicably bound by something, rendering me unable to move. As I was struck with alarm, a faint fragrance wafted into my nose. Feeling the sensation against my body, I realized there was someone sleeping beside me. The pain in my neck had drawn nearly all my attention earlier, and only now did I fully grasp my situation. It seemed I was being held in someone's arms, and that fragrance was emanating from their body. For some reason, the scent carried a vague sense of familiarity. As if sensing the movement beside her, Fu Jiangxue slowly stirred awake. By the faint light streaming through the window, I could make out the girl's face, still slightly chubby with a hint of baby fat. Compared to a few years ago, she had blossomed, growing more radiant and mature. The charm in her alluring eyes had shed its youthful innocence, now tinged with a seasoned, captivating allure. Seeing me awake, she turned and climbed onto me. Without many words, just like when we were kids, she buried her head deep into the crook of my neck, greedily inhaling my scent. Feeling the unusual pressure against my chest, I didn't dare move. I noticed I wasn't wearing much, and Fu Jiangxue beside me was dressed even more scantily, her vast expanse of snow-white skin exposed. As I wondered if she'd been drugged, a slight dampness at my neck pulled my thoughts back. I wanted to stop her, but didn't know what to say. In a daze, Fu Jiangxue trailed from my neck to my chin, along my lips, and finally to the corner of my eyes. Unable to take it any longer, I spoke up, questioning her. "Wake up, Fu Jiangxue. Do you even know what you're doing?" Hearing my voice, the little woman atop me froze noticeably. Then, as if displeased, she leaned down again, her cherry-like lips silencing the words I was about to say. As if in retaliation, she kissed me hard. I felt a slight pain and wanted to resist, but I couldn't bear to hurt her. Soon, a faint taste of blood spread through my mouth, and she seemed to grow even more excited, her hands slipping beneath the covers. Sensing her intent, I instantly lost my composure. Though my hands and feet were immobilized, the strength of a grown man was clearly more than a young girl like her could overpower. Reluctantly, Fu Jiangxue withdrew her wandering hands, repositioning them to grip my shoulders. With a hint of frustration, she pressed her cherry lips down once more. I gave up struggling altogether. Unless she went too far, I let her do as she pleased. After kissing me wildly for a while, Fu Jiangxue collapsed onto me, unmoving. We stayed in silence like that for some time until she suddenly spoke. "Is everything ready?" Her abrupt, inexplicable words left me stunned, until the door slowly creaked open. A woman in professional attire entered, carrying a tray as she approached the room. She spoke respectfully to the figure on the bed. "President, everything you requested is ready. Sit on the table and take everyone out," Fu Jiangxue replied in an icy tone. "But this... Do you not understand me when I speak?" Fu Jiangxue's voice grew even colder. The assistant was visibly shaken. Having worked with Fu Jiangxue for so long, this was the first time she'd seen her so furious. Placing the items down, the assistant shrank slightly before heading toward the door. "You promised you wouldn't leave me. You know there's a punishment for lying." Fu Jiangxue's slightly seductive voice came from above. It was then I realized she was completely lucid, showing no signs of being drugged. Her mind seemed perfectly clear. Just as I was about to speak, my lips were sealed again, a scalding liquid pouring down my throat. My words were cut short, the burning sensation in my throat causing me to cough violently. Fu Jiangxue straddled me, her long, straight legs on either side, a crimson wine glass in her hand as she watched me like I was a play. Irritation flared within me, but she simply finished the last of the wine, casually tossing the glass onto the carpet where it landed without shattering. Why? I wondered silently, asking myself, hadn't I come to save her? How had things become like this? I waited 3 years and finally caught you today. I won't let you go again, no matter what. You belong to me. Fu Jiangxue's voice, tinged with obsession, sent shivers down my spine. I was about to feign innocence, pretending not to know her, when her languid voice drifted over again. This is how you disappear every time, isn't it? Following her gaze, I saw the silver bracelet, the symbol of the system, on her wrist. I wondered why the damn system hadn't made a sound. It had been captured. A wave of helplessness washed over me. Don't try to deny it. Just confess, and I'll be gentle with my punishment. An unhealthy flush crept onto Fu Jiangxue's face. It was then I noticed the changes in my own body. I was burning up, my face as red as a cooked shrimp. What's happening to me? I roared at Fu Jiangxue, my mind starting to cloud over. Those idiots, trying to drug me with that pathetic concoction. They underestimate me. I only pretended to be affected before, hoping you'd come. But thankfully, fate is on my side. I finally have you. This drug is 100 times stronger than theirs. The time that follows belongs to us. Before my consciousness faded completely, I heard the clinking of handcuffs and shackles being unlocked, followed by the ripping of fabric and Fu Jiangxue's intensely seductive whispers. I don't know how long I was out, but when I woke up, my head throbbed and my throat was parched. My body felt weak like a chunk had been carved out. After a while, I took in my surroundings. This wasn't the hotel room where I'd lost consciousness. Where am I? That crazy girl's house. I hadn't expected her to become even more unhinged in the 3 years since I left. Was this the same meek girl who had pleaded with me to stay, her expression filled with vulnerability? And that drug, it was potent. Even without remembering what happened, the red marks covering my body spoke volumes. A woman's humming drifted in from outside the door. She sounded cheerful. The door opened, and Fu Jiangxue froze, her eyes meeting mine. There was no trace of embarrassment on her face as she walked towards the bed. When she noticed the marks on my chest, a faint blush colored her cheeks. "Husband, you're awake." Her first words nearly made me choke. I coughed violently, and she rushed to my side, patting my back to help me catch my breath. I raised my hand and saw the chains still around my wrists. My expression darkened instantly. Fu Jiangxue quickly explained, "I had no choice. I was afraid you'd run away, husband." "I won't run. Can you take these off first?" I tried to reason with her. "No, you've tricked me twice. I won't be fooled again." She knelt by the bed and started to undress, a disturbed look on her face. Stop. Let's talk." "No need for this." I blurted out. "I'll listen to my husband." She paused, her stunning figure accentuated by the iconic uniform beneath her long trench coat. Coupled with her angelic beauty, it was a sight few men could resist. "How long have I been asleep?" I asked, trying to distract her as she leaned closer. "You've been out for a day and a half. That drug is quite effective, but I didn't have enough. I'll need to stock up." A strange glint shone in her eyes, her expression hinting at regret. "My clothes! And I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat?" As soon as I finished speaking, she padded barefoot to a nearby wardrobe. Inside were rows of men's clothing. She selected an outfit and placed it on the bed, looking at me expectantly. "How am I supposed to put this on? Why don't you unlock these first?" I gestured to the chains. "No way. But if you can't dress yourself, I can help you, husband." She hesitated for a moment before refusing. "You have all my things. How could I possibly run?" I said, exasperated. "So you admit it," she exclaimed, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Tell me how you recognized me." I asked, my curiosity piqued. "I won't tell. It's a secret," she declared proudly. In the days that followed, I gradually adapted to life here. Apart from not being able to leave this villa, the rest of it was like living the life of an immortal. 1 o'clock in the dead of night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, bored out of my mind. I was clearly exhausted, but I just couldn't fall asleep. Oh well, I sighed inwardly and got out of bed, heading towards the living room. I poured myself a large glass of water and drank it down in one gulp. Annoyingly, after drinking the water, I found myself even more awake. Whatever. Why torture myself? I thought. There's nothing to do tomorrow anyway. I'm just a lazy bum, so I'll find a movie to watch. No sooner said than done. I turned on the TV, adjusted the volume, and rummaged around for some snacks. I sat on the sofa and began watching a movie with great interest. Before long, Fu Jiangxue came out of her room. Hearing the noise, I turned my head and saw Fu Jiangxue wearing a see-through lace nightgown with a long, smooth leg exposed. I glanced at it, feeling a little strange, but after so many days, I was used to it. This little girl had been dressing so boldly at home these past few days, not treating me like an outsider at all. Not only that, but she even wanted to sleep with me from time to time, but I had forcibly refused her every time. Seeing me sitting on the sofa watching TV, Fu Jiangxue was stunned for a moment. Then the corners of her mouth turned up slightly, where I couldn't see. "What's wrong? Why are you still watching TV so late?" she said, sitting down next to me, taking my hand, and asking with concern. The girl's clear, cool fragrance filled the air, making me feel a little restless. I subtly moved my hand away, saying a little awkwardly, "I don't know, I just can't seem to fall asleep." "Then I'll watch with you," Fu Jiangxue said, raising her little leg and placing her small foot on my thigh. Seeing that I wanted to dodge, Fu Jiangxue gave me a frightening look. After carefully considering the consequences, I finally chose to compromise. If it had just stayed like that, it would have been fine, but the fatal thing was that as we watched the movie, Fu Jiangxue started to get restless. In the end, she simply sat down in my lap. Her hands, which had been moving around, stopped obediently under my almost furious expression, and she sat quietly in my arms, watching the movie. And so, the two of us quietly finished watching the entire movie. I looked down at the little woman in my arms, her small face buried in my chest, not moving at all. "Okay, the movie's over. Can we go to sleep now?" I said. The huge living room was silent for a long time. I lowered my head and looked at the little girl in my arms. Long eyelashes covered her fair and delicate face. Seeing that Fu Jiangxue had fallen asleep, I picked her up and walked towards her room. I gently placed her on the bed, looking at her familiar little face, the obedient look on the little girl's face as she slept, and the small hand that was tightly grasping my arm. Looking at Fu Jiangxue as she slept, I thought that she must have had a hard time these past few years. The next morning, Fu Jiangxue stretched comfortably in bed, got up, and walked out of the room to see the housekeeper approaching. "Miss, should we still put that stimulating medicine in the gentleman's bowl?" the housekeeper asked hesitantly. "Put it in one more time today, reduce the dosage. If he uses the incense I gave him tonight, then we won't need this medicine anymore," Fu Jiangxue said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. That evening, with a hopeful heart, I took the incense Fu Jiangxue had given me. Just as I was about to light it, I suddenly felt something wasn't quite right, like I had overlooked something important. But then I remembered the feeling of insomnia and thought, what's the harm in a little incense? Before lighting it, I specifically smelled the incense, detecting only a faint, pleasant fragrance, nothing unusual. I lit the incense and lay down in bed. This time was different from before. A sense of fatigue quickly washed over me, and I fell into a deep sleep. Not long after, the closed door was suddenly opened, and Fu Jiangxue, seeing the burned-out incense on the floor, looked smug. She gently lifted the covers and slipped in like a loach. Gazing at me with my eyes tightly closed, Fu Jiangxue's face showed an obsessive look, and she leaned over me in an almost sickly manner, doing things she wouldn't dare to do during the day. "After you leave this time, will you come back?" Fu Jiangxue asked the man beneath her, somewhat tough. In my dream, I subconsciously answered no. Hearing this, Fu Jiangxue's heart tightened, a flash of dejection crossing her delicate face, followed by an unprecedented determination. It wasn't until the next day, when I woke up, that I realized I had actually slept quite well. I fell asleep soon after lying down. However, I had a very strange and embarrassing dream. And the subject of the dream was none other than that little girl, Fu Jiangxue, who was all over me in the dream, and I couldn't resist. I couldn't think about it anymore, and quickly shook these unrealistic thoughts out of my head. Looking at the iron chain on my wrist, I had come to understand after these days that I needed to get the system back from Fu Jiangxue as soon as possible. Based on the current results, my mission was complete and I could go back. But then again, looking at this chain, made especially for me, I felt speechless. The other end of the chain was attached to a load-bearing pillar in the villa, and the chain was dozens of meters long, both restraining me and allowing me to move freely within the villa. I had tried to communicate with this little girl, but it only resulted in her punishment. Apart from being confined here, everything else was pretty good. I had food, drinks, and everything I needed. It was almost like my ideal retirement life. A few days passed like this, and Fu Jiangxue, surprisingly, took me out. Just as I was wondering, she brought me to the household registration office here. My face was blank, and I couldn't help but ask, "What are you bringing me here for?" Fu Jiangxue told me mysteriously, "You'll find out soon enough." A group of people were busy around us, and I signed a pile of documents. Looking at the stack of papers in front of me, it took me a while to understand that Fu Jiangxue was registering me for a household. My face was full of speechlessness, but I didn't care and let her do what she wanted. According to Fu Jiangxue's idea, since I want to live in this world, a reasonable identity is essential. She spent a lot of effort to explain why I, such a big person, didn't have a household registration, and of course, this was one of the indispensable steps for her. In one day, Fu Jiangxue dragged me from settling down to getting an ID card. It was not until we finally walked to the Civil Affairs Bureau that I understood the little girl's intention. "What are you trying to do?" Fu Jiangxue's eyes lit up. "Jiangxue, you are mine." The name was given to me by the system when she was in her second year of high school and arranged for me to enter the school. I didn't expect her to remember it. I just wanted to turn around and leave. There was always a sense of incongruity in marrying her. At this time, 2 bodyguards in uniform suddenly appeared behind me and escorted me behind Fu Jiangxue. "Have you thought it through? Are you sure you like me?" I always felt that Fu Jiangxue's dependence on me was greater than her liking. And according to the plot, shouldn't she like the male lead? "Of course I'm sure. Don't try to make excuses to run away." Saying this, Fu Jiangxue directed the bodyguards to escort me into the Civil Affairs Bureau. Just like that, a group of people took me to finish the wedding photos. Back in the car, looking at the 2 red books in my hand, Fu Jiangxue could hardly hide her excitement. I didn't feel anything, but seeing the little girl's happy appearance, my mood inexplicably improved. Might as well make the best of it. I'll just treat this as a vacation. It's surprisingly comfortable living the life of a young master. I thought things would continue on like this, uneventful, until one day. While we were eating, Fu Jiangxue suddenly felt nauseous and ran to the bathroom, retching. Seeing how uncomfortable she was, I got up and went over to her, gently patting her back to soothe her. She didn't eat much dinner, and Fu Jiangxue, who usually clung to me, went to bed early. Neither of us thought much of it, assuming she had just eaten something that disagreed with her. Until the next day, during a meeting at the company, she was so nauseous that she felt like throwing up all the time. After listening to her assistant's advice, she went to the hospital for a checkup and discovered. That evening, back at home, Fu Jiangxue rushed in with her examination report. "I've been living so comfortably lately that I've been eating and sleeping a lot." When Fu Jiangxue came in, I was asleep on the sofa. The young girl hurried over, shook me awake, and held her report up to my face. "Hubby, look, I'm pregnant." Still half asleep, I was momentarily stunned by the shocking news. I dumbly took the report from Fu Jiangxue's hand, and when I saw the contents clearly, I jolted upright on the sofa. Fu Jiangxue happily snuggled into my arms, excitedly saying, "We're having a baby." It took a lot of effort to coax Fu Jiangxue to bed, using the excuse of the baby's health. At first, the little girl stubbornly refused to leave my room. I tried to fan her again. To my surprise, she didn't fall for it this time. She said what was so abnormal about sleeping together after they got married. I had to reason with her, saying, "It's not safe to sleep together during the first 3 months of pregnancy. We can sleep together when the baby is a bit bigger." Finally, Thankfully, Fu Jiangxue didn't argue further and went back to her room, hugging a pillow from mine. Lying in bed that night, I still couldn't quite process the fact that Jiangxue was pregnant. When did this happen? Then I suddenly remembered that night when I was drugged. Sure enough, after just a few days, Fu Jiangxue found all sorts of reasons to move into my room. In the evening, looking at the delicate woman sleeping in my arms, I felt a wave of emotion. I glanced at the silver ring on my wrist, equally puzzled. How come this little girl suddenly agreed to return the system to me? Wasn't she afraid I'd run away again? But no matter what, the system was back, though the bad news was that no matter how I called out to it, the damn system wouldn't respond. Since things had already happened, I had to take responsibility. It's just that I thought of my aunt who raised me from childhood in the original world. Not my mother, but better than my mother. I had no ties in the world that originally belonged to me. I was an orphan, and I'd aunt since I was a child. Apart from being a little worried about my aunt, everything else was secondary. Fortunately, while I was struggling, the system gave me a two-way option. Every year, on a specific date, I could return to my original world for 2 days. Given how much it was helping me, I'll forgive its betrayal. Of course, that's all in the future. After 10 months of pregnancy, Fu Jiangxue gave birth to our first daughter. It was a day of heavy snowfall, and I decided to name our daughter Chudong, early winter. 1 month later, husband, Chudong says she wants sugarcane juice. I heard Fu Jiangxue's voice just as I opened the bedroom door. Turning around, I saw 2 figures, one large and one small, lying on the bed. 2 pairs of large eyes stared at me as I returned from outside. Is it her who wants it? Or is it you, little glutton? Looking at the girl's gradually maturing, delicate face, I couldn't help but give it a fond pinch. She reacted by pouting, feigning anger as she hugged our daughter, muttering to herself, "Your dad is bullying me, little Chudong. Let's ignore him, okay?" Whether or not she truly understood, our daughter waved her chubby little hands gleefully in her swaddling clothes, making sounds, melting the hearts of both of us beside her. 6 years later, at the Capital International Airport, a woman in a black trench coat with a slender figure and exquisite features. Her left hand pulled a suitcase, and her right hand held a cute little girl of about 5 or 6 years old. The young girl's pure and bright face was without makeup, yet still stunning. The little girl beside her was even more so, already showing signs of becoming a great beauty at such a young age. Her smiling face was so chubby that one couldn't resist wanting to pinch it. "Mom, when will we see Dad?" The little one's tender voice sounded. Hearing her daughter's question, Fu Jiangxue replied, "Dad went to see his aunt. Today is little Chudong's birthday. Maybe Dad is at home waiting for us right now." "Really? Let's hurry back then." With that, the child rushed forward excitedly. 13. After dinner, the family of 3 gathered around a large pink cake. The little girl stared at the cake with wide eyes. "Dad, I want the little bunny on top." My daughter pointed at the chocolate decoration on top of the cake, acting all cute. "Okay, Dad will get it for you," I said, reaching out to take it. Fu Jiangxue, who had been staring at me gently, suddenly slapped my hand away. "What are you doing? We haven't made a wish yet." "Come, little Dong, make a wish first, okay?" She put candles on the cake and, familiarly, took the lighter from my pocket to light them. Our daughter innocently closed her eyes and began to make a wish, just like on TV. The family sat at the table, full of joy and harmony. At night, Fu Jiangxue lay on top of me and suddenly said, "Husband, Donger says she wants a little brother." Half asleep, I suddenly heard her say that, and I mumbled, Fu Jiangxue's eyes lit up when she heard that, and then she started taking off her clothes. Half asleep, I suddenly felt something amiss with my body. When I opened my eyes, I saw Fu Jiangxue, her eyes red with desire, looking at me pitifully.